From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Kristen Amiet. It's Monday, February 10. The federal government has committed to keeping 20,000 public servants on the payroll, but a new analysis by the Parliamentary Budget Office suggests that will leave an $11 billion-sized hole in the budget. Now, the opposition wants Labor to show it's working. That exclusive story is live right now at theaustralian.com.au. The estranged husband of missing Lennox Head mother Bronwyn Winfield is trying to sell his home, and it's got her brother worried he's about to skip the country. Andy Reid raised his concerns in a letter to the New South Wales State Coroner Teresa O'Sullivan in December. John Winfield denies any wrongdoing. Rising crime and the crippling cost of living have dealt Victorian Labor a potentially devastating blow. It's a situation the federal government and the opposition are watching closely as an election looms. That's today's episode. When The Australian's Victorian editor Damon Johnston called up the state's Electoral Commission to inquire about the status of the vote count in the Werribee by-election on Sunday, he was told, "Counting will resume at 9 a.m. on Monday morning." For Victorian Labor, it was a prolonging of the agony.
It's been a bloodbath for the Victorian Labor Party in their once heartland seat of Werribee. It was a very dirty Saturday night. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to lose the seat, but what it does mean is that they've suffered a double-digit swing, probably between 10 and 11% on a two-party preferred basis. And that has taken a seat that they've held since 1979, they've never lost it, to the brink of defeat.
Residents of Werribee in Melbourne's outer western suburbs cast their votes on Saturday in a by-election triggered by the resignation of long-standing Victorian Treasurer Tim Pallas in December. It's one of the fastest-growing local government areas in the country, and voters didn't miss their opportunity to send the Victorian Labor government, headed up by Premier Jacinta Allen, a message.
This has happened because the voters in Werribee, Labor voters in the main, have felt neglected, and it taps into that broader sense of discontent in Labor's heartland electorate for the government. They feel the crime's out of control, the cost of living, local roads are a problem, and they brought the baseball bats out on Saturday night and gave the Labor government a real whack.
When counting paused on Saturday night, the Werribee race was on a knife's edge. As the party's more than 10% lead deteriorated, Jacinta Allen told party faithfuls it was too close to call. The state opposition isn't getting ahead of itself either.
Now, the Liberals still believe that the seat is not theirs. They are concerned that they might fall just short, as at Sunday lunchtime. There is no counting Sunday afternoon, but they believe they may fall a couple of hundred votes short. Now, it's important to note that the voters didn't necessarily jump to the Liberals in Werribee. While the Liberal vote did increase by a few percentage points, most of the disaffected Labor voters went to independents, and those preferences are now flowing to the Liberals in part, hence the line ball down to the wire position the electorate is in.
Damon, Jacinta Allen has taken up the Victorian premiership not only after Dan Andrews' long tenure, but after more than 2 decades of Labor leadership. There's a state election coming up in 2026. What does this swing against Labor in Werribee mean for her as Premier and for her government, do you think?
Inevitably, the backlash against Labor has to be interpreted as a backlash against Jacinta Allen. She's the leader. She conceded today that she has to take responsibility for the result. She's also conceded that her government needs to listen more and do more on issues like crime and cost of living.
By-elections are an opportunity for communities to send a message and to make sure their voice is being heard. And what comes with the privilege of being in a Labor government is the opportunity to support what you're being told by working people and families.
She's now been in office as leader for over a year. And this is the first time voters have had a chance to really pass judgment on her, and it was damning. In my view, this will inevitably spark some internal reflections within the ALP and caucus about whether she is the right person to lead the party into the 2026 election. I don't think there'll be any immediate move on Alan. However, if there was another by-election in the next 6 months that also went as badly as this one in a key Labor seat, then I think some tensions might come to the surface.
Victorian Labor has been protected for decades by a so-called red wall in the outer western suburbs. Their seats, like Werribee, that, until Saturday, have been safely held by Victorian Labor through election cycle after election cycle. But as the tide turns against Labor governments around the country, that era could be coming to a close.
Labor's red wall at both the state and federal level has been under siege now for some years. However, this is the first time it's been really penetrated. It's fair to say that Labor's wall is crumbling as we speak. Labor strategist and pollster Cos Samaras has described it as more of a barbed wire red fence, and says that the mood is on for Labor voters to vote against the ALP. What's happened in Werribee is quite historic. Even if they hold the seat, they have made their intentions known, and I think any Labor MP who holds a once safe seat at either a state or federal level should now consider their electorates to be marginal in the west of Melbourne.
At the same time Werribee locals were casting their votes, a by-election was also happening in the inner city suburb of Prahran. That vote was triggered by the resignation of MP Sam Hibbins from the Victorian Greens in 2024.
The Victorian Greens have been rocked by a sex scandal that's forced a married MP to step down. Deputy Leader Sam Hibbins breached party room rules by having an affair with one of his staffers.
By lunchtime on Sunday, Victorian Greens leader Ellen Sandell conceded her party couldn't win this one.
I think in the federal election and the state election next year, we're going to see really positive results and we're going to win this seat back based on the numbers that are simply in front of us.
New opposition leader Brad Batten, who was installed following a rocky couple of months for the Victorian Libs, said the election of Rachel Westaway was a boon for the party.
But here in Prahran, we are very proud to declare that we can claim victory in a seat that many didn't think was possible just 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Labor didn't contest the Prahran by-election, but Damon reckons the result there could be a sign of things to come at the federal level.
Clearly the Liberals are back in town. Peter Dutton has pegged the outer suburban voters to be his target audience for the next federal election. He'll be looking at this and thinking, on one level, it's positive. Clearly there's dissatisfaction with Labor. But if he's honest with himself, he'll be thinking the Liberal Party have still got a lot of work to do to ensure that those angry Labor voters actually support the Liberal Party.
Coming up, what a turning of the tide in Werribee means for the federal government. Greg Brown is one of the Australian senior federal politics specialists. He rang around Parliament to find out how members of both the major parties are feeling about Werribee on Sunday.
Well, that's to be expected. It's been played down by Labor circles and been played up in Liberal circles. That's politics. What has been interesting is there are concerns within Labor MPs about how the Labor brand is faring in Victoria. And what their concern is that people in these kind of working class areas, the outer suburbs, are feeling abandoned, particularly by the state government. But what they're worried about is while a lot of the damage has been done by the state government, their view is that people just want to blame Labor of all persuasions, and they're worried this could hurt them at a federal level. One thing that an MP said that is really concerning is while constituents know that crime is fundamentally a state issue, they're just so angry with Labor that they're raising it with federal MPs quite a lot.
Yeah, something that we saw in Werribee was that this wasn't and hasn't been yet an out-and-out victory for the Liberals. And in fact, the votes that were lost by Labor appear to have at least in part gone to independents. So do you think we could see a similar trend at the federal election?
That would be a worry for the Liberal Party if that took place. They'd really be wanting those votes themselves. And that's something that Labor MPs have raised as when they say that people that are on the side of nothing to see here, the votes didn't go to the Liberals. And the other thing they're saying is that this was really a referendum on the state government without another choice, really. Whereas they're saying that the federal election is different, because you're not just sending a message to Anthony Albanese, you're making a decision between Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton. It's also been pointed out that by-elections can be an unreliable predictor. Before the 2019 election, Bill Shorten had some very significant by-election wins in the seats of Longman and Braddon, and then he went on to lose both of those seats in the next federal election, and he obviously lost the election. So there are people within Labor circles saying that there shouldn't be too much to be read into this, but in the Liberal camp and some in the Labor camp as well, they believe that it shows that the Labor brand is on the nose and that crime, while it's usually a state issue, I think the Libs are really going to try and turn this into a federal issue as much as possible.
Greg Brown is a federal political specialist with The Australian, and Damon Johnston is our Victorian editor. You can read all their reporting and analysis of the fallout from the Werribee and Prahran by-elections right now at theaustralian.com.au.